know what it is. Don't pretend like you don't. You read the headline. You didn't read the headline. It's Spoilerin time. We're going to spoil episode 12 of season 7 of The Shield. How close we are to the end. We'll also spoil episode 5, season 2 of The Leftovers, episode 3, season 2 of Fargo, and we will spoil the unnecessary facts of the movie draft because this man, Brian Brushwood, has Star Wars Force Awakens. Why do we even bother?
Yeah, because anything could happen, so let's check in on the movie draft!
I didn't think anything could depress a movie owner more than Gem and the Holograms until Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse came out.
Yeah, dude, I think they had their sights set on like Zombieland kind of numbers instead. Launching on Halloween weekend, they brought in a rocking $1,800,000, which Brian Ibbott bought for nearly 20% of his entire spending budget.
And I'll be honest, I didn't expect this movie to be worth the $17 he spent on it, but I didn't think it would do worse than Gem and the Hologram.
Yeah, so how relieved are you?
$2 million, by the way, making it the 8th best buy.
How relieved are you that your position is secured as not the worst buyer?
Yeah, last week it was the 2nd worst. Now it's only the 3rd worst buy.
There you go.
You know, I could have ended with $97, or I could have Gem and the Holograms. It's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Paranormal Activity has been a hot and cold franchise, but has traditionally been a good buy. I know it was part of I believe, a winning strategy that Justin had like 3 or 4 years ago. But it's just so hot and cold. And in this case, you know, even through second week in, less than $14 million, and you know, Malengo spent $14 game dollars on it.
Yeah. Put it in perspective. The number 8 buy is Gem and the Holograms. The number 7 buy is Paranormal Activity.
Good point. So at this point, now here's the thing. Malengo had, a fantastic purchase with The Martian, but his second purchase, Paranormal Activity, which he spent half as much on as The Martian, it has vastly underperformed. We're looking at what he has left. He's got The Good Dinosaur, which will probably do.
Be big.
It'll be 200 to 250 million. The Big Short and The Fifth Wave, he's on track to come in right around just over 500 million by those estimates. We'll see. But right now, it's his to lose. I don't see a lot just rocketing past him just yet.
No, I don't either. And I feel like he's even got a shot at you with Star Wars Force Awakens only because you have 75% of gross. I think if you had the full gross, this really would be like just shadow dancing.
Yeah, how big is Spectre going to be, do you think?
Spectre's going to be big. I imagine it'll be a couple hundred million, and that'll get me close to 300 million. The night before Peanuts movie, sister.
Peanuts movie is going to be an easy 100 million.
I don't have Spectre won't be enough to lift me into Malengo's territory or your territory. It'll probably get me close to a fight for second or third, I think.
God, it's so amazing because the money is made on this. There are the occasional surprise hits, but really the money's made by avoiding the bombs, because you can have a fantastic hit, and then if you buy a couple of bombs, you're out.
Listen, if Spectre overperforms, which it could, and the Peanuts movie performs well, which I doubt, then I might be back into contention. But both those things have to happen. I don't think Spectre will overperform. I think it'll perform just about as expected.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right. Well, let's get into Spoilerin some Fargo, episode 3 of season 2, where we are underway. We are in the plot. I can barely remember what happened this episode versus other episodes, because Mom is got propped up Colonel Ty sitting at the table,
right,
as she deals with the folks from Kansas City. I guess the only thing that's puzzling me is the folks from Kansas City kind of keep saying the same thing every episode, which is, well, we'll either kill him or we'll make a deal. And I'm like, we don't seem to be getting any progress from them.
Yeah, but also I think that's their job as the forgive me for saying, the Phantom Menace of this episode. Just this external force that, they are a cold front coming in, and the story is about how people are preparing for the storm. And in this case, you have Mom jockeying for position, saying like, hey, hello, fellow criminals. Our family has this arrangement. Can I count on you? And then they say, well, we're not really excited about it, but you got my axe. I'll cut his nose off. Meanwhile, I am falling in love with what's Mike's last name?
Milligan.
Mike
Milligan.
Milligan is my favorite character because I realized like his whole gimmick is that he's unflappable, but not in a cold-blooded kind of way. It's as though he's playing Magic the Gathering. And it's like, and then somebody has a bad card draw, and he goes, it might help that I was playing Hearthstone when I came up with this analogy. But and he just goes, whoops, when a gun gets pulled and then the other gun gets pulled and he's like, whoops, and he's kind of grinning because he's genuinely curious as to how this is all going to play out. And then I don't know, his exchanges, the character Mike Milligan's great, building up tremendous respect for Solverson, and especially the fact two high noon showdowns in one day, all part of work, and then coming home and playing cribbage with his wife and father-in-law, is
well, how about the showdown on the family farm there? Was just fantastic.
Well,
so many good dynamics playing out there. You knew what to expect from the family, but then his partner from the other law enforcement agency kind of showing hey, you got to know how to play these people. And Solverson like, no, I don't. I'm not from here, and I know how to play myself. And yeah, really did show the character of Lou Solverson there.
Yeah, and again, like, and did it in just the right and believable way, where it's like he knows not to advance too far, he knows not to push a hand, but he also knows to not give up his ground. He's like, I'm a GD police officer, and I'm not gonna yield any ground, and if it's gonna end in a murder of me, then so be it. Speaking of murders, Weasley typewriter guy. I did not expect him to be gone and in such a brutal, visceral, and I guess really haunting way, because you didn't see him cut up or blowed up. You didn't see any blood. You just saw the threat, and you're like, oh, this is a negotiation tactic. They're trying to get him to talk to you. And then they're like, nope, you got nothing for us. Blur. And then it's just, he's just suffocated and dead underneath there.
Useless and complicated, so out of the way. Goodbye.
Yeah, yeah.
Meanwhile, the Blomquists decide that they have to fake the accident and do our almost required running a car into a tree.
Yeah, although, they sort of set up Chekhov's busted taillight with beforehand, so I'm certain that all will not go well with this plan.
And it was actually nice to see him miss, because it's like, oh yeah, sure, anybody can run a car into a tree.
No,
on ice? Like, that's actually really believable that someone would try to do that and mess it up like that. I think that's good.
Well, and more importantly, we got the fact that at least, well, I guess both of them by the end know who the guy is and know what it means. And all of a sudden, on the one hand, it's like, well, the guy's a wanted murderer. Then, yeah, they should just go to the cops and say, hey, this is pretty messed up. But I know DNA isn't a thing yet. But in 20 years, this ground hamburger will show that it's really him. But on the flip side, I think what they're doing, this is the first time I've agreed with what they're doing, because nothing but trouble if you tell the cops, nothing but trouble if the cops know, because then the criminals know that you killed and ground up.
Oh yeah, no, they've got themselves in a classic bind where they can't tell anyone. Like, they have to cover it up from every single angle, and that's a lot of angles, especially when you have Mike Milligan poking around.
Yeah. And by the way, Mike Milligan, who instantly saw through, the who did the murders and all that stuff, and I'm enjoying this more now, and for very different reasons than the first season. The set dressing is the same, the location is the same, the time has changed, but it's a very different story with different vectors. And I adore the fact that I don't really know where they're headed with all this.
Yeah, one side thing that I'm enjoying on this, and I'm a big fan of period pieces for that reason, is the real 1970s that they have created, some of which I remember. Like, I'm looking at things going, and I get this when I watch The Americans, which is set in the 80s, but it's the same thing where it's not overdone. Like, it's not that 70s show where they're like, let's stick disco records in every shot. It's like, no, that's actually what the 70s really looked like, because my grandma had that particular, tea kettle or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's just, they've done a real good job of creating that atmosphere. And so that just is, that's garnishing on top, obviously. But
Man, I'm serious. I would watch the Mike Milligan show. They should have a Better Call Saul of this spinoff, and it's just Mike Milligan dealing with criminal stuff all over the world.
no, I know, and it's perfect if you've watched season one, which you wouldn't have to, I guess. But if you've watched season one and you saw the cold dead eyes of Billy Bob Thornton's character, Mike Milligan's just a refreshing take.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's not the same guy. It's the same mode.
Still a sociopath, but
But
a
a
very
different kind,
cheerful
a different
chrome on
brand.
it. Yeah. Well, and especially also knowing, racially things are so different now than they were 40 years ago or 35 years ago. So it's like for him to be that cool and confident under pressure in a time that, race was still very much worn on his sleeve. In the 1970s was the blaxploitation era of filmmaking.
Oh,
and
is he
so
black?
Yeah, okay, see, I'm the racist for noticing that he's the black gentleman. All right.
I just noticed he wears that nice blue suit coat.
I noticed that his hair has all this shampoo he can't get out of it. All right,
He's dapper. That's the other thing about him, though. In all seriousness, all kidding
shows up
aside.
late for a meeting because he can't get the shampoo out of his hair. Just says it.
But yeah, no, he is. I think that's an intentional choice. All kidding aside, to say like, let's create a black character in 1970s America and just set him on a path that you would not normally have seen in a 1970s show.
Yeah, correct. Man, good stuff.
Let's go to The Leftovers, episode 5, season 2, wherein Christopher Eccleston's character, Matt, the preacher, has a hard time, Brian.
Matt Jameson, man. It's funny because we haven't seen a lot of Matt in this season, and we did briefly hear his story of why he fell in love with Miracle, Jordan, Texas, and why he believes in it. Loved what they did last episode by couching. There's 2 different takes. You have, and again, I forgot the neighbor's name. John, yes, John Murphy. You have John Murphy who says there are no miracles in Miracle, and that's because I said it. And you have Matt who's like, no, that's why we're here, and that's why everyone else is coming here is because I witnessed a miracle.
Well, and why is John so? I still haven't figured out why he is so adamant about that.
And that's what Matt asked at the end of this episode. He says, "Why are you so angry at this town?" And that's what sets John off. He just ends up leaving because he's like, "Screw you, deal with it." And
that's a better mystery for me than any mystery we had in season 1.
Well, and there was something. This is the first time you saw the cynical John Murphy speaking to the total believer of Matt Jameson, and Matt is backlit with all this holy light and this glow around his head. John is framed in shadow. You have darkness and light, which again, post-racial America is fine to do. And you have this interaction, this cynicism versus this ignorant belief. And of course, they do a great job of letting us see just a little bit of his wife talking and being awake, but under the very dubious circumstances of him just having received a head trauma. And a great job of this taffy, like pushing and pulling, while meanwhile, Matt Jameson goes through darkness. It's like you kept thinking like, oh yeah, 2 beats of dark, now it'll turn around. And then they took that turnaround and they made it with something even darker. And then the implications of it, with the pregnancy and the fact that everyone's going to view it through this lens.
Well, and I am still unconvinced whether she ever talked or not. And in fact, I was willing to believe it more before this episode because the only time he can hear her talk is when he's in trauma and no one else sees it. I'm like, I'm starting to believe that she never did talk, and that was all in his head.
You can certainly see it that way, which is, of course, the genius of the way they're doing this storytelling.
Totally.
I got to tell you, it was great to see Kevin Garvey trying to make a decision, and I loved the fact that Nora, full on made a call. It's like, look, hey, man, blood first. Hey, they got an anonymous tip about the girls. That's why they're all running, get in the trunk. And then you have that kind of, that Matt Jameson possible miracle situation popping up. And I don't know. He's a more interesting character to me this season than he was first season because his problems are more tangible in that it's like, what do you do in that his box is smaller I guess is what I'm saying, because he's not wrestling with being the PR spokesman for explaining, the apocalypse. He instead is a man with a vegetative wife who is trying to wrestle with how to make it work and whether or not he witnessed a miracle, and never doubting what he sees and experiences.
Well, never admitting that he doubts.
That's true.
At least
that's true.
Which I think is the point, right? Is that he is convincing himself that all of this is true, and he may have convinced himself, and he may be right. We don't know.
By the way, passive aggressively, Neshcom is posting notes in the chat saying, "You'd think you'd have taken a photo. That would have been a big news story, right?" That's not Matt. I don't think for a second Matt would genuinely.
He was so in love with his wife, Neshcom, that he couldn't think to stop and crassly record it.
Not selfie
until afterwards.
That's just not. Well, I mean, first of all, that's not inconsistent with.
Sure. Later, he set up an infrared camera to capture her every night.
Well, that's because he learned his lesson. He thought he would have forever to get around to taking photos. It turns out it wasn't. He's like, "I'm going to get you next time, God."
All right.
I think this is a great episode. I think that the character study stuff works for me really well, and I like that. I liked everything with the doctor's office, and I liked Nora coming to his rescue. I like John and Kevin's battle, and seeing more about John's anger and having that confrontation. The only part that I didn't love so much in this episode is the Charlie Rose nature of the camp outside. It felt a little self-indulgent. It's not that I didn't believe the camp would have characters like that, but it just, I don't know, it took me away from the mystique and the tone.
Charlie Rose?
I don't know, it felt like they were trying to have a circus freak show out there in the
campground. You mean the Jim Rose Circus Sideshow, not Charlie Rose.
Yeah, the Charlie Rose Circus, where everyone really calmly sits down in a suit and discusses things.
So what do you believe happened?
Yeah, yes, I meant Jim Rose. The Swedish guy was cartoony, and the woman who's like, you gotta hit him and call him Brian.
I actually, number one, this is also, not only do we get the first real understanding of why Matt believes so much in Miracle, we also get the first time of really seeing the teeth bared around it. Now I understand why Jardin, Texas is freaking insane about keeping the wristbands and all that stuff. Because
I knew that already. I didn't need this.
I mean, I did, though. I did. I don't think I think it was like, well, these seem like over-the-top measures. But I mean, you're like, no, genuinely, every crazy person.
You didn't notice all the crazy people in the trailers every time they drove into town?
I mean, yeah, but I didn't feel them. I didn't feel the threat of them.
And you really bought the Swedish guy?
In the context of everything else, the Swedish guy was like the seventh or eighth craziest person we saw there,
Yeah, hell yeah.
I liked it because also, here's the other thing, is Matt's going through this kind of like hero's journey thing, which means he has to go through the darkness. And we've already seen the darkness of death. We haven't seen the darkness of insanity on this show before.
Hey, just my opinion, man. Just my opinion. I thought it was a little much.
No, that's cool. I liked it. I was along for the ride on all that. It was epic.
I do wish it was the Charlie Rose Circus.
The Charlie Rose Circus.
And now the trampoline. Yeah, but and overall, I didn't hate those scenes either. So don't. I don't mean to overstate it. That scene, which you need the Swedish guy to make happen, where he is in the tunnel with the water coming through, is just terrifying. To me, I believed it because I have people who will not stop talking about what happens at Burning Man. And to me, that's just Burning Man outside. And I don't even know that that's nearly as crazy as Burning Man. I'm not saying it's even unrealistic. It just seems self-indulgent and off-tone to me.
Yeah, fair enough. Like Burning Man, as a religion, and I know Burning Man is a religion to a lot of people, but like when you believe it with the with the life and death immediate fervocity of people who have lost people, I would imagine it gets a little sideways.
Well, do you mean Bernie Man, where the Bernie Sanders?
Yes. Dude, is that a recruiting event? That's where the Charlie Rose
Circus plays at Burning Man.
The top 10% of the statue.
I would pay not for his candidacy, but for him to do a fundraising event called Bernie Man.
All right. Enough of me saying wrong things. Shall we move on to the Shield?
Yeah. For the record, I full disclosure, I texted Tom saying, holy cow, it took me 3 tries to start the Shield because I started it. And each time I started it, it was in one of those kind of passive viewing environments. And then I get to the opening murders with Mara and the noose tightening around the financially strapped Shane Vandrell. And then that moment that Mara pulls out, has the gun and just fires right as a random girl walks across and gets her head blown off and falls down with her panties wedged up her butt crack. And now that's a corpse. And I'm like, too dark. And I couldn't begin until I had the right moment. But this is an extremely important, I mean, this is the episode of the entire series, I think. There's only one other scene that sticks out of my mind as strong as this, because you also get Vic's flat out betrayal, it looks like, of Gardaki, because he says that he's trying to pull Gardaki along for the ride, but then Vic's wife is implicated, he thinks is under arrest, and so he trades it all in, says we'll deal with Gardaki later. Now the only question is whether or not in his heart he believes he'll be able to fix things for Gardaki or not, but we know factually he lays it all on the table here.
Yeah, in fact, this could easily, in another series, have been the finale.
Yeah.
Like, I if you would have intercut Vic confessing to everything, because man, that moment when he says, you know, I shot Terry, you're like, holy shit, we've been avoiding that for 7 seasons. Like that just happened. That just went out the table. That's the MacGuffin. That's what we've been after. He just said it on the record, with a recording, and you see Olivia and her boss's reactions.
Like, what did we just buy?
Exactly. It's like I in my head later on, I was imagining like you intercut that with like Wims busting in on Shane and a shootout beginning. And then you intercut that with like Gardaki being approached by a sad looking a Wagenbach who's like about to arrest him. And you see Wims running, you know, like you could have had that be the finale, which is like they bust Gardaki, they kill Shane, and yet Vic gets away because of this immunity, and Wims is there at the last minute and she's angry. Like, I'm like, holy crap, they didn't go for that. What do they have left in their cannon here? And I'm not saying that to mean like they don't have any bullets left. Like they got bullets left, and I don't know where they're going.
I'll say that this episode, this scene, was exquisitely acted by CCH Pounder, Michael Chiklis, and Walton Goggins. Standout performances, possibly of their entire careers. You know,
how bold, thinking back, and I know you know how the last episode goes, but thinking back, how bold is it to spend Vic's confession in the penultimate episode?
Yeah, well, and kind of the what, tri-ultimate, or you know, if you count the splitting up of the last one.
I mean, it's called episode 13, parts 1 and 2, so I'm assuming they meant it to be aired as a whole.
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, it gets even more impressive.
Well, and plus also to see the meltdown of our rock, our touchstone this entire time. The one adult in this whole freaking show, the one person who's been an adult by and large from the beginning to the end has been Wims, and to see her break and to turn on, of all people, Wagenbach, and just say, "You're fired, you sanctimonious son of a bitch." I mean, that cut, and it cut so deeply that it was amazing to see Wagenbach be all like, "This isn't you. What is
well,
this?"
Well, and now, remember a couple episodes back, and you're like, I don't know if it's that important. We had the sex offender that Billings calls in a favor with North Hollywood.
Yep.
It's like, yeah, okay, now I get why we had that. That needed to happen so that Billings had something to hold over Wagenbach, so that Wagenbach would make the deal, so that Wagenbach would have made this tiny little deal, which really doesn't matter, but it's enough for Wims to grab on and be angry with, because it's a small representation of this monstrous thing that she has just witnessed.
And and that's a really good way to put it, because the only thing better than Vic Mackey's acting during the confession, because they take a long time and he says a lot with his eyes before he even opens his mouth to speak. And the only thing better than that pregnant pause is having Wims burst in and see it with her own eyes. I mean, it's as wrong an ending as you could have possibly pitched me after watching the pilot episode. You could watch the pilot episode and then say, this is where it all ends up 7 seasons later. And you're like, no!
No,
I mean,
it won't.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing.
So yeah, I mean, like I said, you intercut a few resolutions there to the other plot line, and you could call this a day and be like, evil triumphed. He got immunity.
I don't think I'm telling you anything you don't know when I say that there is more. There is more to be surprised by, and more parts of the story you're going to be glad that you saw.
Oh, sure. No,
by the time
I get that. There certainly is more with Vic to play out, and we've identified a couple of those threads, regarding Gardaki and Corinne, among other things. And obviously, we didn't get the resolution to Gardaki and Shane's story. So there's a lot that adds a lot more possibilities to the pot here. But yeah, that just makes it all the more impressive to me.
Yeah, holy cow, man, Shane. I just feel wrapped in I'd say wrapped in a straitjacket, but I know how to get out of those. It's like I feel just trapped.
You're like Tom Merritt wrapped in a straitjacket.
Yeah, exactly. Boxed in. I mean, it's like what are Shane's plays at this point?
He got nothing. Right?
And I mean, we see him just devolving into just robbing street thugs of their drugs, not even of their money. It's like,
well, and he's an addict now. Like, having Shane give the classic, like, just need to take the edge off, honey. It's cool. Like, oh shit, that's addict talk.
Yeah. Well, and also,
that's frightening.
But it's also couched in of all the times to say, no, seriously, I need to stay focused right now. When you're inches away from having Farmington police actually track you down, seems like a pretty good time. If you are in that mindset, especially coming down after a crash, it's like, like when I play Fallout. There are times I'm going to use an excuse for drug using. When you play Fallout and you're about to die, that's the time to use all the jet you can, and you don't really care, what happens because you're either going to die or make it through this fight.
Yeah. Well, but at the same time, you can tell he is disassociated a bit from Mara, because Mara is in crisis. Mara hasn't killed someone before like Shane has, and so that's a huge deal, and he is sympathetic but a little bit distracted.
Yeah, agreed. I cannot wait to see what the last 2 weeks holds. You sure you don't want to watch?
If I can stick to just watching part 1. We'll see.
Okay, you know what? Possibly, if you're playing along at home, I'm just gonna say, come in, having watched both, because if that's what Tom decides to do, you'll be glad you're caught up. And if he doesn't, then you got another week to hear Tom's reaction.
Then you can laugh at me as I go, well, in part 2, I wonder if this will happen. Thanks to everybody for listening or watching or absorbing it through your skin.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.